Okay, good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. Today, I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Scott Parazynski, who has one of the most amazing resumes I've ever seen. Somebody who's gone to medical school, is a medical doctor, was an astronaut, has been the CEO, physician, inventor, founder of companies, runs companies, CEOs of companies. Scott, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for making me sound good. It's great to be with you.
Well, let me start by one thing, because you are the first of all the guests that I've had, and I've had over 200 of them,
Right.
that I've never interviewed, which is an astronaut, which of course, when I was a kid growing up in the 70s, everybody wanted to be an astronaut. So tell me a little bit about that piece of your career first.
Well, it's funny you should say that. Yeah, I live here in Houston, and as we like to joke, you can't swing a dead cat around here without hitting an old astronaut. But yeah, so my journey to the stars began when I was very young. Like you, every kid on the block wanted to become an astronaut. I grew up in the shadow of the Apollo program with my father, working on the Saturn V boosters that sent astronauts to the moon in the late 60s, early 70s. So I was, immersed in it, and time would stop when there was a launch. And just to parenthetically, as we're recording this, early this morning, an enormous rocket called Artemis launched to the moon as a forerunner for human missions back to the moon as part of Project Artemis. So it's a really exciting time to be alive and to be talking about the space program. But for me, I set my sights on the stars back when I was a little kid, in the shadow of all that. I got a chance to see the launch of Apollo 9 from the beach at Cocoa Beach, Florida, when I was a little kid, and imagine what it would be like to be the first astronaut to set boot prints down on Mars one day. It didn't obviously quite turn out that way for me, but I had a wonderful career with NASA. I spent 17 years in astronaut corps, and I flew 5 space shuttle missions, did 7 spacewalks. It was, the best job in the universe, for sure.
Wow. Tell me about the qualifications to become an astronaut. I mean, I understand it's very rigorous, isn't it? I mean, it's not easy to become an astronaut.
Well, obviously they're pretty lax if they took me, but yeah, the requirements are actually quite basic, in that you need to have at least a bachelor's degree and 3 years of experience in a field relevant to the space program. So for me, it was a background in medicine, but engineering, physics, computer science, things of that nature, flight test engineering. We also have military test pilots. So that is a kind of a core set of requirements. And then obviously a background in pursuits and working in stressful environments. So I was an emergency physician, and there are professions that are as stressful as that, because you're dealing with life and death situations all the time. So that was, I think, coming into the space program, but all something that really helped me as I went through my career. I was also a scientist. I was doing research in terms of physiologic adaptation to living and working in microgravity. So kind of with that skill set, I was in a good position to apply. But now I think it's quite interesting thinking about the future in space flight. We're going to be going back to the moon to stay, and ultimately, if you believe Elon Musk, Mars. And so we're going to need all of us to go. We're going to need not physicians and engineers and scientists, but we'll need, artists and lawyers and every discipline under the sun to create a community there.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's kind of fun to think about.
What did you enjoy most about being an astronaut? Is it just the space part of it, or there's actually a lot of aspects that you really enjoyed?
There's so many wonderful things about it, Richard. The fact that you're a part of a mission that's larger than life, and doing things that ultimately have great benefit for society. We don't go to space just to go hang out, look out the window, and do a couple of experiments. We're trying to extend human presence. We're developing new technologies to allow us to go further, but we're also looking back at planet Earth. What are the things that we can do to improve the quality of life here on Earth? So, there's so many medical technologies. When I walk in an ICU or an OR these days, so many of the technologies that exist there have their pedigree in the space program, and materials that protect firefighters and our military, computer algorithms, things that we take for granted in the daily fabric of our lives have their in space.
Now, let me ask you, you obviously went to medical school before you became an astronaut. Did you go to medical school because you thought that would be a good path to being an astronaut, or were you going to become a doctor and then you decided to switch to being an astronaut later?
I that some of the very earliest space shuttle astronauts, the first class of astronauts for the space shuttle program, were physicians. And so I'd always had a love of medicine. I wanted to become a healer. And I figured that they would need, doctors as the space program kind of really expanded. And sure enough, as the space shuttle program launched, I was still in training. That all came to pass. And so I was able to combine both of my passions in life. I knew it would be a long shot. So I wanted to do something that I would love, even if I never became an astronaut. And so I pursued medicine, but with the goal in the back of my mind that I might get a chance to do
Which space shuttle missions did you get to fly on?
I flew on 5. My first mission was a mission called STS-66, studying the Earth's atmosphere, particularly the ozone layer. That I was so integrally involved in our climate and protection from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. So a very complex mission mapping the planet's ozone layer in the upper reaches of the atmosphere. And then a second flight, I went to the Russian space station Mir on STS-86 and led the first joint US-Russian spacewalk while docked to the space station. It was a really amazing life experience. Then on my third flight on STS-95, went into space with my boyhood hero, Senator John Glenn. He, of course, was our first American astronaut in Project Mercury to orbit the Earth back in 1961.
Wow.
Actually, 1962. And so at age 77, he returned to space. And it was a bit of a high pucker factor kind of mission, because if something happened to John, I might as well not come back home. And then I took a couple of trips up to the International Space Station doing spacewalks to build and repair the ISS missions. STS-100 with Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut, and then a number of spacewalks during my last flight, STS-120.
Now, normally you would think, being a doctor and an astronaut, that's 2 careers, and that's more than most people can do. But actually, for you, you were just getting started. So from there, tell me some of the other things you've done since then.
Well, I've had a lot of fun. I enjoy challenging work, and I love innovation, and that's what I loved about being part of the space program. Is we're solving challenging problems. It required thinking out of the box all the time, and so it was a natural transition for me to leave the space program and go into an entrepreneurial world as an inventor and product developer, and growing companies. And so I've been a part of a number of startups, and I really love the challenge of it. I would have to say that being an entrepreneur is the most challenging thing I've ever done, and you know how hard it is. I had this simplistic notion when I started doing this that the hardest part was just coming up with the great idea, the thing that the planet needed. But that's really the easiest. It's it's building the team, it's the fundraising, it's the manufacturing, it's the marketing, the HR, supply chain, all these different things that we take for granted. We have all these products around us, but just to build a simple product is incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And so I've learned a lot in the years since I left.
Well, what are some of the companies you've built or technologies you've invented?
Yeah, so I'm currently working in a couple of environments. One is a company called Fluidity Technologies, which initially distributed a drone flight controller, but with great promise for surgical robotics. And we're still pursuing that as a very, very intuitive means to move anything through a three-dimensional space, whether it's a physical asset like a drone or an aircraft, or even in a virtual environment. So we have really wonderful human-machine interfaces, but currently we're actually, we're still working on electric vertical takeoff and land aircraft. That's hugely disruptive. It's still behind the cone of silence. We can't really talk about what we're building quite yet, but it's going to be a really wonderful new way to move about. And then I'm also very actively engaged in a company called Community Wellness that is involved in remote patient monitoring and telehealth in some really wonderful ways. It's telehealth augmented with clinically trained health and wellness coaches that can really develop a long-term bond with their patients and really drive outstanding outcomes. It's not how long you live, but it's how long you live well. And so we're not only about working towards medication compliance and doing the basics, but really driving outcomes to improve mobility, improve diet, exercise, smoking reduction, alcohol reduction, and live a better life. And so we're real excited about the growth that we're seeing in that market.
And those are, I mean, is that your full-time? Are you full-time with those two companies, or you have other stuff going on even beyond that?
Well, I sit on some boards and have some medical device innovations that I'm commercializing on the side as well. Yeah, I don't sleep much.
Do you do venture investing? Do you invest in any companies, or you pretty much play the entrepreneur role?
I invest in the companies that I'm involved in.
Okay.
Very actively, and I have in the past been involved in some venture and kind of super angel groups. Advising those enterprises. But currently I've got all I can handle right now.
But you're running these businesses. This is not just you did the invention and you're just handing it off to somebody, right? You're actually running the company.
I'm actively involved. Yeah. You can't grow something of substance unless you're all in.
Yeah. Well, what made you decide to even be an entrepreneur? I mean, is that something again that you've always wanted to do, or what prompted you to decide, after having been in a career as an astronaut and stuff?
Even as a little kid, I had little startup businesses. They weren't very successful, but I had I had a babysitting gigs, and I mowed lawns. I was kind of a entrepreneurially minded. I saved money. I did a little bit of investing back then, and it was an inventor as well. Early on, I wish I had been more focused on it during my NASA years, because we came up with a lot of really cool things that could have been probably commercialized, but we had our head down towards what we were building. But I've had a number of little ventures, kind of, I guess it would be called the side hustle, in my earlier life as well. Always just enjoyed that.
Well, it sounds like you really had a career where you've been able to combine all your different interests and passions, and you've gotten to do things that are so disparately different. You know what I'm saying? It's not, an astronaut's completely from a doctor, and an entrepreneur, you know what I'm saying? Like they're really different things. So, I mean, do you feel like you missed anything in there?
Well, I think medicine is such a great background for so many different areas of of tech and business. It's the mindset, it's the team building, it's the comfort in adversity, it's the resilience that's required.
Yeah.
So I see that as a great attribute that helped me immensely at NASA. It's helping me enormously now as an entrepreneur and as a board member. And just like, law is a great background, and, in other fields are great entrees into it. No one person can do it all. And one of the things I've learned as an entrepreneur is to identify what your strengths are, and then surround yourself with really, really smart people, ideally smarter than you, who can shore up your weaknesses. So I've been pretty lucky in building some strong teams over the years.
Now, have you written a book about any of this or not?
I have, yeah.
Oh.
So I wish I had a copy of my book handy, but I believe it's still a bestseller autobiography that I co-wrote with wonderful collaborative writer Susie Flory, and it's called The Sky Below. So it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek perspective of looking down, obviously from Earth orbit, but even from the top of Mount Everest, where I've also been able to travel. But it's a book about the perspectives learned not just from successes, but from failures in life. All of us, if we're honest with ourselves, have had a lot of hiccups along the way, and I'm no different. And so with tenacity, I've been able to pursue my dreams, and I'm pretty happy where it's taken me. So I hope it's a source of inspiration for people who read it.
Yeah. Well, Scott, it's been great talking to you, and I loved hearing your story. It still boggles my mind on how many things you've done. But since I know you're not near retirement, please come back and tell me in a few years what else you would still be doing.
Oh, I can't wait. Well, I think retirement is overrated. So I can't envision myself ever completely retiring. I love the mental challenge of trying to come up with solutions to significant unmet needs. I try and invent something, if not every day, as often as I can in my daily life, and I hope I keep on doing that. I hope I continue to have the drive to keep on inventing. So I'd love to come back in a while.
Something tells me there's no doubt about that. This is Richard Hsu and Scott Parazynski. Thanks.